Bear with me. Okay. You can get so confused that you'll start into a race down long wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace, and the grind on for miles across weirdest wild space, headed, I fear, towards the most useless place, the waiting place. For people just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or mail to come, or a plane, or a rain to go, or a phone to ring, or snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for a fish to bite, or waiting for a wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. So, how many people have been in the waiting place, where you're just waiting and you can choose to be impatient or patient? So, what I'm going to be preaching about is biblical patience in a fast-paced world. These are some examples of issues that may lead to impatience in our lives. Traffic jams. How many people have been behind the slowest car on the highway and you have to get to work? Technology malfunctions. I know this is with me because if I play video games and it turns off, and then I get mad and like, why does it turn back on? Also, if you're watching TV and then like you're watching the Super Bowl and your TV turns off, you might get impatient about that. The main point about impatience is that it's other people not moving at the same pace we would like them to. Children, where if you have to get to church and your kids can't find a shoe and then you get impatient and you're like, we have to get to church. Communication with other people. So if you like call somebody and you're like, why don't they answer the phone? That's impatience. Service rendered unto us. This is like if you go to a restaurant, because me and my family went to this restaurant, and my sister ordered these potatoes, and then after, when we ordered dessert, they weren't even that good, so. Witnessing to a lost person or a new Christian. That takes a while, but it's worth it. And waiting on the Lord for direction or an answer to prayer. The thing about that one is, you don't know if he answered your prayer yet, or you're waiting on it, or you don't need it. And there's many other examples. Impatience leads to health risks, stress-related illness caused by frustration, irritation, and anger. Procrastination. Avoid putting in long, hard work and waiting till the last minute. Poor judgment. So if you're planning something and you're somebody asks you, what do you want on your sandwich? And you're just put anything you want. And then when you get the sandwich, everything you don't like's on there. And so, financial woes, where if you're impatient to get something and you want it now, you don't save up your money and then you're in debt to somebody because you want instant gratification. It can hurt relationships with family. How many people have been to a party and then you're like, where's my friend? They're late. Then you might say, why were you late? And you might get mad at them and then they might not talk to you, which is bad. So impatience is lack of faith in God, and you're relying on yourself rather than relying on God, which is very bad. These are some Bible examples of impatience that lead to consequences. Genesis 16, 1 through 2. You don't have to turn to these pages, but I'm just going to read them out loud. Abraham and Sarah, who did not wait for God to give them a son, so Sarah said, have a son with Hagar, which started the Arab nation, which was a big problem for Israel in the later times. Genesis 25, 30 through 34. Esau's impatient cost him his birthright. I mean, if that was me and I was hungry like that, I would just give him it. I don't care. Numbers 29 through 12. God said for Moses to hit the rock once so the people could have water, but he did it twice because the people were like, I want water, and he got impatient with God. 1 Samuel 13, 6 through 12. Saul made an offering without Samuel, that's when God started to turn away from him, and he lost his kingdom. Matthew 18, 20 through 30. This is a parable Jesus taught, the unforgiving debtor, so this man was in debt to the king, and the king forgave him, and he was, the man's lore, was in debt to him, so the man got impatient with him and threw him in jail. But when the king heard about this, he put the man in jail, and the one that was in jail before took the other man's position. So if somebody forgives you, like Jesus did, you should forgive others, or else you're going to be punished. 1 Corinthians 11, 12 through 21. Wait, no, 20 through 21. The Corinthian Christians at their communal meal. So that'd be like they were hungry and they didn't really respect the communal meal. It'd be like us eating communion, like breakfast. That'd be weird. So how many think this prayer would work up here? It wouldn't, because it says, bless me with patience, not opportunities to be patient. I've had plenty of those, and they don't seem to be working, the actual patience. The problem with this prayer is that if this was the case, and if God gave us patience, it would be too easy, and then we wouldn't have free will, which is, he just gives us opportunities, he doesn't give us patience. God does not like us to be impatient. Defining patience. The Hebrew translation of patience is kava, which means to wait for, to look for, to hope, and to expect. The Greek translation, hypomeno, which means to abide, to remain, to persevere, to endure, or to bear bravely and calmly. I'm not going to read all of this, but the main words are in italics here. The suffering, endurance, waiting long, and perseverance. What I thought patience was before I did this is patience, I thought, was just waiting. It's actually persevering, suffering, waiting long, and endurance. Okay, so I'm going to have 10 volunteers read each one of these verses. So can I have 10 volunteers, please? Okay. So, Mr. Trudell, you can read the first one there. And Mrs. Trudell, you can read Psalm 41 through 40, verse 1. I'm going to have you guys pass this around, okay? Yeah.
Romans 12:12, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer.
Psalm 40, verse 1. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry.
So who wants to read the next one?
The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeketh him. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth.
So who wants to read Romans 5, 3 through 5? Okay.
Not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us.
Okay, so one more, but then we don't have enough time for these ones. So, okay.
Micah 7:7. But as for me, I will watch expectantly for the Lord. I will wait for the Lord of my salvation. My God will hear me.
So now I'm going to show some biblical examples of patient people. Abraham, keep in mind, he wasn't the one that was impatient. Sarah was. He was waiting for a son. He had his son when he was 100 years old. Joseph went from pit to prison to palace. So he was in prison and he didn't try to escape because he was patient and he believed God would get him out of there. Noah, he built the ark. It took him, I think, around 100 years to do, and people were doubting him the whole time. Well, sometimes he was impatient, but we're all impatient sometimes. I mean, I would be very impatient if I had to build an ark for 100 years. I don't think I would live that long, though. Job, and like I said before, patience is perseverance. So Job persevered through all these trials and believed God would help him through it, when all his friends were like, curse God and die. Jeremiah prophesied for 40 years and no one listened. That'd be like me preaching for 40 years and nobody heard a word I said. You guys can hear me, right? Also, Jeremiah wept over the foolish people who refused to turn from their sin. Simeon. He was the priest at the time before Jesus was born, and he asked God if I could see the Messiah before I died. And he did. He waited a long time for the Messiah, then after he saw the Messiah, he died. Oh, well, he might have, I don't know. Jesus, of course, was patient. He patiently taught disciples even when they're often confused. That's why he probably taught in parables. We are to show patience, a testimony in the Christian walk, even if we are in a fast-paced, impatient world. When you pass the waiting test, God will release you to his best. Thank you for your patience today.
Man, that was good. All right, let's have our second guy coming up to do the second and final sermon of the night, Nick Windsor.
Today we're going to be reviewing patience, but we're going to be looking at a specific example of this in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, about how God keeps his promises. Now in this story, it does end up taking 430 years for him to keep his promise, which is why it was important for his people to remain patient. We'll start by going over Exodus 1, verse 8 to 16. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it came to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up and out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because the children of Israel and the Egyptians made the children Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick, and in the manner of service in the field. And their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake unto the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Sipporah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, When ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, ye shall them upon the stools. If it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So basically what this is, the Egyptians are getting really freaked out because the Israelites are multiplying and they're afraid that they might take over. So they put out this order that they're to kill the baby boys. And this is really where the suffering begins in the book of Exodus. You can see the examples of rigor and hard work that they put on the Israelites to make them not multiply. And this is a time of suffering. And next we go over Exodus 2, verse 1. And there went a man of the house of Levi and took a wife, a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw that he was a godly child, she hid him 3 months. So basically what this is when Moses is born. So Moses is born here, and obviously this is a bad time to be a baby boy because baby boys are killed. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him into an ark of the bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein. and she laid it in the flags by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to wit that she could be done to him. So basically what they've done is they've hid Moses in the bulrushes inside this ark that they made for him, and they put him in the river so that he can escape. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and the maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go call thee the nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. So basically, God has showed mercy on Moses here, because he normally would have been killed, but since Pharaoh's daughter found him, he's now saved. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses. And she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he's seeing the suffering, and here Moses wants to do something about it. This is somebody sent by God to relieve the Israelites of their suffering. And he said, "Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me? And thou killedest the Egyptian?" And Moses feared, and said, "Surely this thing is known." So now it's known that he killed the Egyptian. He killed the Egyptian because he saw that the Israelite was suffering under the Egyptian. And now he's going to flee to the land of Midian. Now we move on to verse 22. Actually, we don't. We move on to chapter 3. So this is the burning bush. Everybody is quite familiar with the story of the burning bush, I should imagine. This is basically where Moses goes out into the wilderness and God appears to him in a burning bush. And what we have on screen is a burning bush. Now, it's not actually on fire, but this is a plant that's native to Japan, and I just found it kind of interesting when I looked up burning bush, it popped up. And God appeared to Moses in the burning bush and told him to go back and to help the Israelites. And if we go to verse 23, "And it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of a bondage, and they cried, and their cry came unto God by reason of bondage. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abram and Isaac and with Jacob." So here God remembers his covenant. He promised the Israelites that he would get them out of this, and he remembered. And even though it took a while, the Israelites are still going to be saved. He didn't forget his promise. And this is why it's important to be patient, because even though it doesn't seem like it, God always remembers his promises. He doesn't forget us. We have to remember that. Now we move on to chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro and his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and led the flock to the backside of the desert. And he came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, "I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt." And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of a bush, and said, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here am I." And he said, "Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground." Moreover, he said, "I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows." Now this is important, because even though it doesn't seem like it, if God doesn't know something, he knows what we're going through. He knows everything that's happening, so you can always count on him, and if you pray to him, he will know what's happening. Seems like he doesn't if he doesn't do anything right away. "And I came down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land, and unto a good land, and a large unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So what has happened is God's come down and he's told Moses that he is now going to deliver the Israelites out of Egypt. So now if we skip forward a bit to the end of the plague, to Exodus 11. Now by verse 30, this is basically summarizing the whole thing. What's happened is the plagues have ended. This is just the end of the plagues. Obviously the plagues were going on for some time, and Pharaoh wasn't going to have any of it. He wasn't going to let the Egyptians go no matter what. He had absolutely none of it. And it must have been quite difficult for the Israelites in this time because God was trying to deliver them, but Pharaoh just wouldn't have any of it. But this is where it ends. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. This is what God had to resort to get Pharaoh to listen, but he's come through. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, "Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as ye have said." So here Moses has finally managed to get his people out of Egypt. God has freed them. Pharaoh has let them go because he's had absolutely enough of these plagues. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, "We be all dead men." So the Egyptians don't just want the Israelites to get out, they are very happy to get the Israelites out. They are very happy. They say, get out, go, quick. And God has delivered them. Not just delivered them, he's made the enemies urgent to get them out. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, and the knead righteous being bound up to the clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses. They borrowed of the Egyptians jewels and silver and jewels of gold and raiment. So they've even taken the Egyptian stuff here. They haven't just gotten out. They get to loot the Egyptian stuff, which is pretty cool. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that when they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoilt the Egyptians. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, and about 600,000 on foot that were men, besides the children. So there were lots of Israelites that were fleeing. And in the mixed multitude went also upon with them flocks, herds, and even very much cattle. There were lots of animals that they took with. They took lots of stuff from Egypt. They didn't go empty-handed. And they baked unleavened cakes of dough, which they brought forth out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, and could not tarry. Neither had they prepared themselves for any victual. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. Now this was a long time, but God still managed to take them through to the promised land. And as you can see on screen, there is the Red Sea being parted. And this represents an obstacle that the Israelites had to face. Now in life, everybody faces big obstacles, and you have to be patient and faithful and know that God will help you over them, even if they seem impossible. And it came to pass at the end of 430 years, even if the self-same day it came to pass that the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. They finally managed to get out of Egypt. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. And that is the night of the Lord to be observed of all children of Israel in their generations. So basically what verse 42 is aimed at is that this should be passed down among generations, because this is a very important story, and that the generations of Israelites have to keep this in mind in their everyday lives. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, "This is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall be no stranger eat thereof. But every man's servant that has brought money, when thou hast circumcised him, thou shalt eat thereof." So now we're going to have a feast to celebrate. And this feast is always going to be used to remember that God keeps his promises. Thank you for coming today, and you may be dismissed. Not yet. Are we going to sing a song? If we have time, we might actually have a closing song.